Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Centus webinar. Today, we're joined by our very own Dr. Vanessa Cook, the Head of Positive Safety, and Maddie Storey, Principal Consultant. And together, they will walk us through the importance of taking a systems approach to psychosocial safety. As we welcome attendees today from across our beautiful country and beyond, Centus acknowledges the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognises their connections to land, waters and community. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today, and we do this because we truly value Australian and Torres Strait Islander history, culture and knowledge. While we do have everyone on mute, please share your questions, reflections, and ideas in our live chat, which you can open from the bottom of the meeting window. All questions will be answered during a Q&A period at the end of the session. Also, note that this session is being recorded and you will receive an email with access to the session recording and the slides by tomorrow afternoon. So no stress trying to take down all of those notes. And with that, I'll pass over to Vanessa and Maddie to kick us off.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine. What a great introduction. Welcome to all of our listeners who've jumped on the call, and welcome, Maddie. I've been wanting to do a webinar with you for a long time. It's going to be lots of fun. We're going to have a ball with this conversation. And I really do mean that. I want to see you in the chat. For those of you on the call, I want to know about your reflections, your shares, and your questions and challenges as we go through. I do have my eye on the chat window as well. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. So for those of you that don't know Centus or have not worked with us, these are our values and our mission. Our mission is to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. And we do that with these three pillars by aiming to be a great place to work. We really care about and invest in our people and our culture. We support great work, and in particular with a couple of conservation projects that we have. And we do great work with many fantastic leaders, individuals and organisations. These are just some of them. I've been with Centus now for over 8 years. You're getting up there too, Maddie. and we worked with lots and lots of clients, these and a lot more in our time. And it's a joy to work with these fantastic people. We have a wonderful team of org psychologists, research specialists, all sorts of safety specialists and other unicorns. And we deliver world-class safety, culture and leadership diagnostics, training, coaching, consulting, and we offer a wonderful suite of leadership embedding tools and things like that. So that's a little bit about us. But why does this conversation matter now? So we're talking about psychosocial safety and taking a kind of a systems lens to that. Why this is so important? Well, psychosocial safety is sort of on the agenda of everyone at the moment. Would you agree with that, Maddie?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the word that you're hearing a lot at the moment. And I think the understanding of what it actually is confusing a lot of people too.
Absolutely. So we need to actually be quite considered with how we approach psychosocial safety, because there is the danger that we can approach it in the same way that we've approached safety before, potentially from a bit of a reactive and compliance-based mindset. So for instance, I've got on the screen here the risk management model. Many of you would be very familiar with that. And just to take you through the steps, it's really about identifying those psychosocial or other hazards and risks, assessing that level of risk, putting controls in place and monitoring and reviewing. And look, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Of course, we need to meet compliance and have that sort of a compliance mindset to an extent. That's what we sort of deem the conventional safety approach, where we're trying to go from being non-compliant to compliant with safety regulations. That is important, but it doesn't necessarily go far enough. In fact, I love this term, little fires everywhere. If we just take a reactive approach to psychosocial safety, I find what we're doing is just rushing around trying to put out all these little fires, and it doesn't go far enough or deep enough. And I wonder for those listening whether this resonates or rings any bells here. Sometimes it might be that training is rolled out to fix particular behaviour issues, while leaders actually lack the capability or the emotional intelligence to role model and respond well. So just throwing training at something without really building the capability behind that. It might be going ahead and doing risk assessments without really getting the consultation or the trust required to genuinely hear the felt experience of the workplace. Or it could be that policies are updated, but people's day-to-day experience of work is that the pressure's still high, my role is still unclear, workload remains the same. So is that something that you find resonates with the clients you're speaking with, Maddie?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think compliance is a place for a lot of people to try and understand this well, because it can feel a little bit grey. So it's a great starting place. But when we really actually see and go beyond go beyond compliance, psychosocial safety really is a foundation for great culture and leadership. And it gives us a more intricate understanding of what that takes as well. It's such a strategic lever for innovation and trust and performance. And I think when we start with compliance fee and we don't go beyond that, I know you always say that if we aim for compliance, that's all we'll get. We're really going to activate threaten people and not necessarily trust as well. I think an example of this, a training example, right? Like and it's a great place to start. You'll see, for example, a constructive conflict training being rolled out. And as I said, fantastic place to start, but that's only really going to be effective in your psychosocial risk management if people are actually able to engage in the skill that creates. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that takes, but if we just solely focus on the training, and I've had that experience with clients as well, they get into that mode. We all know that our brain shuts down and we forget everything that we've known in that particular moment as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit of how we start to do that. I also think the compliance-based mindset as well, the dangers of that is this idea of, and a lot of research that Centres has spoken to, and I've experienced this firsthand, is just how important the social experience is when it comes to creating an experience of work. And when we think about that compliance base and how it adds threat, we're really not using that as an opportunity. And it's often what we've seen in our research is being one of the greatest strengths in organisations, but the greatest room for improvement as well. And I think if we're willing to look at the leadership components of that, we have a really good chance at improving culture.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, so compliance does have a place, but it doesn't go far enough. And running around trying to put out the little fires everywhere, we miss the root causes. We can frustrate the workforce. We can exhaust leaders. And so we need to look at how to get beyond that mindset. So here, and you may have seen this little model before, this is our positive safety continuum. But what we see there is that beyond that level of compliance, we can reach this point of citizenship where the safety experience or the experience of work is positive. I like to use a bit of an analogy here because we know that health is not just the absence of disease, right? It's the presence of thriving. And, the same thing, safety is not just the absence of, injury or incidents, but we would say it's the presence of positive safety, a really genuinely a positive experience of work. To use a bit of a psychosocial example here, let's take bullying, for instance. Now, bullying and harassment are very important issues and things that we need to manage and ensure that we do meet compliance around. But I want to ask you, and those on the call, is just not being bullied in the workplace, is that really the highest goal that we want to aim for? Because I would say that, yes, it's absolutely important that we protect our people from bullying and harassment. But I would say that our highest goal is that our people are not only not bullied, but they actually have a positive experience of work where they feel respected, seen, heard, and valued so that they can achieve their highest potential in their role. I mean, that to me is the sort of goals we want to be setting around psychosocial safety. And so you can see that that goes beyond just meeting compliance and ticking boxes, but actually being invested in the experience of work that we're creating. And so, and we can see our model there, our safety experience is around that physical as well as the social and psychological experience that work gives us. So what influences our experience of work? Well, this is where we have to take a systems lens because there's a lot of talk about job factors at the moment, role clarity, the pressure and demands on us in our job roles. But that's not the only thing that actually influences our experience of work. There's also the team factors, how the team norms and how we feel within the team, whether we feel respected, whether we have psychological safety, whether there's good banter and good vibes between our team and also within our team and between teams across the broader organisation. Then there's leadership factors influence our experience of work. In fact, they say that your direct leader has the most influence over your experience of work out of anything. So there's leadership factors and there's also the organisational factors, the policies, procedures, systems, the priorities of the organisation, the felt commitment to psychosocial safety from the very top leaders. These are all things that will influence our experience of work. And this is why we need to take this sort of a lens where we're considering all of these factors. So I'm going to take you through a couple of slides here where we really unpack what it looks like when these elements of the system are either supporting or undermining psychosocial safety. So from an organisational factors lens, we can see here that sometimes it could be that psychosocial safety exists mostly in policies, in procedures, in reports, but the felt behaviour is, for instance, have you ever been in a situation where you can see that there's poor behaviour that people are getting away with that is not challenged or dealt with because they could be a top performer or someone who's been in the organisation for many years? What sort of felt experience does it create for the workforce when, for instance, that is not managed or priorities change? It could be that, the regulations around psychosocial safety have come in recently. So psychosocial safety is flavour of the month. It's this quarter's focus. But then next quarter, the priorities might shift and, we're getting lean and agile. And then it's only after we see some psychosocial claims coming in that this becomes a focus again. That on again, off again, shifting of priorities and not feeling the commitment from the senior leaders, this creates an experience that, oh yeah, this matters until something else more important comes along. Leadership from that lens, it could be that leaders are told to be supportive, they're told to be leading psychosocial safety and that, this matters, but they're not given clear direction and expectations. They're put through training, but not actually given the time and the support to build their capability and their skill development. And so difficult behaviour is managed inconsistently. The experience of leadership can be uncertainty, fear of getting wrong, fear of getting it wrong. And so they end up not knowing how to manage situations and they're silent. From a team lens, it could be that psychosocial issues are only talked about after conflict or harm. And the team norms are that they don't really know how to have constructive challenge, how to give feedback in a way that is taken well. And so people feel personally a little unsafe, they're guarded, they have their walls up. And so silence here can be mistaken for harmony. And the experience is tension under the surface, avoidance, people are keeping their heads down. From a job lens here, when the job factors are undermining psychosocial safety, it could be that high demand, lots of pressure is just normalized as, well, this is just part of the job. And when adjustments are made, they're made to the individual so that they can cope with the role rather than making systemic changes to improve that job experience for all. So the experience can be constant strain, fatigue, and a sense of being set up to fail. And from the individual factors, now this one I'm sure we can all resonate with, often the focus is on the individual to be resilient. So the message is, this is a you problem. You know, if you're not coping, if you're feeling, psychosocially burdened in some way, that's a you problem. You need to be more resilient. So in the chat, and I'm going to start to watch out your responses here, I'd love to know if this is the sort of experience or sort of factors that you're noticing. You can see here that if this is what's going on within the system, the organisational system, how effective is it going to be to just throw some training at people, or, to have an initiative if there are these sorts of things going on? So you can sort of see how that would be undermining the impact that you might have had. I'm going to move on now to what it looks like when these elements of this system actually support psychosocial safety. And then, Maddie, I'd love you to weigh in with your thoughts around this. So let's have a look at how it can be different. So from an organisational perspective, when the strategy, governance, incentives and priorities all signal to the workforce, your experience here genuinely matters to us. That's what we want. We want consistent and clear messaging from above, and we want to see that reflected in all of the systems, policies, the way the organisations run. We want to see that message that's going to people, that we actually care about their experience of work. I've had a few conversations with clients around this, that psychosocial safety, we're not just putting in new initiatives and tackling this because we have to tick a compliance box. We genuinely care about the experience of work that we're giving to people. From the leadership perspective, leadership capability, the way that they role model, demonstrate emotional intelligence and influence people every day, that creates the experience of predictability, fairness and trust. Team factors, the team norms that are supportive of psychosocial safety is when people know how to challenge each other constructively. They can share responsibility, they have confidence to speak up, so they have good, strong relationships that enable them to actually have some challenge and to speak openly, give feedback. The job factors, job demands, control, clarity and resources create an experience of fairness and sustainable performance. And so from an individual factor here, our experience of work is that we feel seen, heard and valued. So that's what it can look like when each of those elements is supporting our psychosocial safety. I will say, though, as a bit of a caveat, that doesn't mean that everything is perfect and nothing bad ever happens. Because to be frank, we can't actually eliminate all of the psychosocial hazards. We're always some roles are going to have to deal with challenging consumers or, all sorts of things. There's going to be high pressure times of the year. There's all of these psychosocial hazards will still exist. The question becomes, how does the system respond when those things do happen? And is that response supportive or undermining our psychosocial safety? So Maddie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love that point that you make, and I think it's often, and Amy always talks about it, our head of psychology here. It's that idea that psychosocial factors and hazards in some cases are always going to exist. It's how we move through them, which really shows how healthy our system is. And something, an analogy that it's really resonated with me in working with clients, Vanessa, is this idea of thinking of an organization almost like a nervous system, right? When it's not healthy and you see it's dysregulated, you're going to see that with sustained workload pressure, ambiguity, like what you were talking about before, that blame, micromanagement, all these sort of factors that are reinforcing each other. And it's really hard for us, through our experience of work, to change from that, right? Our brain is so molded from our environment to then, if we think of like a really healthy system where these issues are going to exist. And one of the biggest misconceptions around this space is that it's about being nice and it's not about having conflict. A really healthy organizational system is able to have conflict. Those issues are able to rise to the surface and we can move through them. So we're able to, move towards those places of innovation and productivity. And it's really interesting when we look at the costs of this space as well. So I think when we view systems thinking, view behavior as what you've said there, Vanessa, as an output of interconnected factors, and a healthy system, those root causes are going to rise to the surface quicker. And we're just going to move through them quicker, right? And I think it's a really healthier space to be.
Absolutely. It makes me think of the term positive duty. I know that lots of your clients have been, really looking for that and interested in positive duty. And that is, positive duty requires organizations to actively identify, eliminate, or minimize psychosocial risks before they cause psychological harm. And I love that. Now, interestingly, positive duty is normally focused on sexual harassment and sex discrimination. But I think actually that's what we mean by positive safety, right? By actually being proactive and preventative rather than waiting for those little fires to pop up and then trying to run around putting them all out. More controls here, controls there, etc. It's taking a step back and looking at the experience of work that we're creating for people and thinking about how do we create an environment where these fires are not likely to spring up at all, and that sense of positive and preventative duty. I love that term.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and I know this is your term, Vanessa, around that culture compromising behavior. It's once those cases that are a bit more black and white are there, they're inappropriate or the appropriate behavior, but it's the early piece and navigating those early conversations can be really tricky. And I think when we start to have a system and those subtle cues that reinforce and respond that, whether that's our leadership or the way that we've implemented these skills into our daily basis, we're finding that's how we start to move towards that. And I think even coming back to that social experience, when we have a really good relationship with our peers and there's trust and leadership, we're able to feel more comfortable, like we're social beings, to start to have these conversations earlier, right? And there's a lot of attitudes and norms that we need to change around that space. So yeah, I completely agree with that definition there.
Wonderful. I'm just thinking before we move on from this, when the people on the call are looking at this little systems model, there's a couple of ways you can use this. You could actually, draw these out and think about, are those individual areas of the system supporting or undermining psychosocial safety? So create a bit of a list of the sorts of things that you're seeing within your organization and whether they're enabling factors or whether they're going to be undermining psychosocial safety. But also, if you're about to roll out some training or start an initiative or something like that, take a step back and think about, is our system going to support or undermine what we're trying to get out of that initiative? So it sort of brings me to this next slide, actually, and that is that piecemeal actions, unfortunately, will not get you far enough. So sustainable impact requires systemic transformation. So we do need to be taking that systems lens and thinking about how the system itself responds to this change we want to create. Isolated activity doesn't go far enough. And so transformation means mindset shifts, leadership capability and courage, and embedding change. And in fact, I've actually just, I'm going to do a little plug for Brené's latest book, She's everyone I'm sure on the call knows I love Brene, but her latest book is actually all about transformation. There's a great quote she has in here about what transformation is from David White, and it says, "Transformation is to hit present reality at high velocity and watch it break apart at impact." Now that sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? Like I'm imagining lots of people on the call thinking, "Oh my God, that would be a nightmare," in the organization. However, really consider a little small actions that we try to input here or there. Is that going to give you the change that you really want? Fascinatingly, her book as well talks about what's required with transformation. She talks about the 6 sets of change: assessment, mindsets, skill sets, tool sets, coaching sets, and system sets. So I love that my gal Brene and I are speaking the same language, and it's fantastic. But what are your reflections on this idea of piecemeal actions?
Yeah, this is something that I've had a bit of experience with, and a place where I really think it's important to talk about as well. I think it can be easy to want to take this approach, and it's very, very understandable. If we think about, again, that idea of an organizational nervous system, and almost think about it like as an injury, like if we think about ourselves and we're recovering from something, if we think about that in a organization context, it's going to take a systemic approach. It's not going to take isolated initiatives. And as much as they might treat visible symptoms, they're not necessarily getting to the root cause, which could be a myriad of things. It could be workload design, leadership inconsistency, whatever it might be, but it's going to keep that dysregulated system intact. And one of the pieces you said there, Vanessa, as well, sometimes when we start this journey as well, you think about individual change, it's going to bring up some feelings of resistance and discomfort. And the only way out is through as well. And I think a lot of these skills, being able to sit in the discomfort of uncomfortable emotions, that's where really true transformation is going to happen. And I think recovery is incremented, but it needs to be integrated, and we need to restore that stability. And one of the things I've seen as an example is, often you'll do the psychosocial risk assessment, and you'll roll out the training. And then there might be some feelings that come up of the past a couple of years ago. And it can be really disappointing for leadership, because well, is this not working? Why are they still stuck in the past? And again, the only way out is through, and it's really taking time to acknowledge that. And sometimes there can be really unique data points there. And sometimes, again, it's just about reiterating that trust. And like anything, you think back to, we know these things, and then something hits you at work, and you go back to those old habits and patterns. So I think about thinking on an individual level, but then thinking on a group level as well. It just takes time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So assuming that we're ready to embrace the mindset that it takes transformation, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to take you through this little model here that shows how you can drive your positive safety journey. And it shows that we really do need to go through these phases of understanding and harnessing that data and insights. We need to become aligned. We need to implement the change, but we also need to integrate it. And each of those phases is incredibly important. And so I'm going to go through what good looks like in each of those areas, and then throw to Maddie to give us some client context around what she's seeing people do well, not so well, or that sort of thing, how she manages each of those areas. So the understand phase, what good looks like is understanding the story beyond the data. It would be very easy to just, do a psychosocial risk assessment and then rush in to sort of put out those fires and make change. But I put it to you that it's really important to go a little bit deeper and really seek to understand the story that comes about when we knit different pieces of data together. So that might be understanding the culture and leadership experience through diagnostics. Maddie, I'm sure you'll talk about MIBO, using a really good sort of gold standard assessment to understand the psychosocial issues, and that is the positive factors as well as the hindering and harmful factors. And also it's ensuring that we're really hearing the experience, the felt experience of people. So consulting with employees, understanding the risks and enablers, the past initiative, what have they tried before, how has it worked, understanding their context, and also the readiness of the C-suite, because this change does not happen from frontline leaders down.
Yeah.
It absolutely has to be driven right from the top, and that can challenge a lot of people, that we actually need right from the board, the C-suite, senior leaders, to be showing commitment to psychosocial safety and demonstrating that consistently in order to get, leaders, the frontline leaders, on board. So, Maddie, what are your thoughts around this understand phase?
Yeah, you've touched on a couple of really important points there, especially around that executive fear space as well. I think one of the parts, and this is a really crucial area, is organizations can often hold like fragmented data from surveys, maybe risk registers, incident reports, whatever it might be, but they really struggle to translate that into clear priorities. And then often what you can see is that approach can become quite reactive, right? Or it can stall. And one of the interesting parts about MIBO, and it is quickly becoming gold standard recognized, is psychosocial hazards tend to interconnect, right? And we know that people experience them differently based on a wider range of factors as well. And to actually assess the level of psychological harm can be quite difficult. So it does a really nice job of doing that. And it evaluates the 24 psychosocial factors out there, but also it's really looking at the protective factors. And we don't want to do, one of the biggest misconceptions is trying to do everything at once. That can do often more harm than good. And when we're actually looking at some of those interrelated factors, when we take something like bullying, it can often be, poor change management or organizational justice can coincide with that. So really understanding what are going to be the jobs to be done and the most impactful jobs to be done, I think provides a lot of clarity. And around that executive fear space, the cost of inaction from a productivity, from a liability perspective, but then also I think from a moral perspective as well, is really, really interesting in getting people on board. But MIBO also can look at actually establishing some clear information on the costs of how much that this space can like how much this space can impact our organizations as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so doing this phase well and ensuring we really understand that story behind the data is so helpful. I know a lot of organizations we've been working with love that it helps them to really target particular areas. They know where to start. They know what the priority issues are. So it gives you a lot of direction. So then we move into the align phase. And so what good looks like here is that there's shared meaning, clear direction, and ownership of strategy and priorities. So one thing I'll say here is that psychosocial safety is not just the remit of the HR team or people and culture. Just because of the nature of psychosocial safety, every single person, every leader in that organization influences the felt psychosocial safety of the people around them, the people they work with. And so it can't just be, sometimes we do see that, well, the safety team does the traditional, the real safety stuff. And then, people and culture are taking on this psychosocial. We don't want to be fragmented there. We need to have shared understanding. We need to have stakeholder alignment and awareness, a good governance and strategy design. And in particular here, we want to be thinking about what happens after the implementation phase right up front. So when we do go ahead with this initiative, this change project or training or whatever it looks like, how do you ensure that that is going to stick? How do you get it infiltrating the system so that it will be sustained? So we want to be future focused right from the outset here in this align phase. Maddie, how are you helping clients in this space?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's often one of the phases that can be overlooked as well. And I think it's a psychosocial, any psychosocial safety transformation can often fail at the align stage if it's not done right, right? We want to be bringing the right stakeholders on board. We want to have that executive buy-in. And as you said, there is still a very common misconception out there that that falls on HR only. And once you start to look at organizations as systems, interventions interact with policies, leadership behaviors, culture, and we need those things to reinforce each other. So the more that we've got that buy-in and people have an understanding of what it is, what the jobs to be done are, and that emotional buy-in, the more that we're going to set things up. And I do think one of the phases here is to actually give people clear how. It creates a lot less of that confusion and fear around the space as well. So it can look anything from like those alignment sessions to support with strategy, and it's again where the organization's at and where the need is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, we're finding with some of the organizations we work with, when we do get all the stakeholders in the room and we talk about psychosocial safety, we can see how we can actually, pardon the phrase, but kill many birds with one stone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
By improving, say, leadership, we're actually influencing psychosocial safety and improving that psychosocial safety in many particular hazards around that, as well as it's going to influence general safety and culture. So, really important to get everyone sort of, in the room to look at, well, what's my piece in this puzzle?
Yeah, and I mean, this will probably lead us into the next phase, Vanessa. I think what I really see, emotional intelligence is really the glue that brings the psychosocial framework to life, right? It turns your policies, it turns your actions or whatever it might be into everyday actions and reinforcements. And that's a really cool part about it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the implement phase then, so what good looks like, and I love this little phrase here, capability building, not information dumping. I've been reflecting on, I'm seeing a lot of pushback to the concept of training lately. There's a lot of people out there going, training doesn't work, training is useless. The thing is, training is an important, part. It's an important role that it plays, and that is to not only disseminate knowledge and information, but it's actually often getting people in the same space and going through this experience together of learning. However, training doesn't go far enough. It's not enough alone. And so here, we've got shifting mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets, leveraging a little bit from Brené's work. But, it's really about looking at how we translate that knowledge into action, into behaviors, into our systems, etc. So here, for instance, we have programs in that psychosocial space around respectful behavior, productive conflict, speaking up, supportive conversations, etc. But it's not just disseminating that knowledge and information, it's backing that up with coaching and feedback, with actual skills practice, so that we're building capability, not just dumping. Unfortunately, we don't live in the matrix where you can just dump the information and then have the skills, right? We actually, as human beings, we need a bit of practice, time, reflection, support to build that capability. So this is what we call an effective implementation phase. Maddie, over to you.
I know this is a phase that I'm particularly passionate about as well. And I was actually thinking this morning, Vanessa, just as to why, because you see it done well and you see it done not so well as well. And I think I started my career working in schools and saw kids from backgrounds and they stayed in the cycle. And that's where the whole systems thinking approach came from. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was we were never taught how to regulate a lot of us, weren't taught how to regulate our emotions, weren't taught how to have supportive conversations or conflict or any of those pieces. And it's really interesting when you run, I think they're some of the most crucial skills, right? They turn next level skill into, innovation and new concepts. And I know I've said that word a lot, but I was talking to someone recently and they had done a training, and then when they were in that moment, they were stressed, their frontal cortex shut down, and they went back to the old patterns and ways of being. And we've got to remember that these skills are not easy, and they challenge a lot of things that we know. And I think if we're looking at this in what we'd like it to look like in the day-to-day, we've got leaders that are able to recognize stress and ill feelings in themselves. And the more that you're able to do that, the more that you've got the capacity to do that for other people. You're able to have that feedback. You're able to be able to regulate yourself during high stakes conversations. You're then on a really interesting level able to coach other people. And I think then you're able to start to look at it from a systems level. But I think one of the things that we've got to remember with training is having a really great first experience of training, giving people the tools is really, really important. But our attitudes are shaped by our experience, our social norms, emotional memory, which means we can't just change attitudes by telling people to think differently, which comes back to your compliance approach. If you've worked out a way to do that, please let me know. But I think if we come back to everything that we've talked about, we need to actually bring our training to life. And otherwise, those old behaviors are going to surface, right? And knowing doesn't equal doing. So our nervous system is always probably going to override intention. So I think we need to look at then how we design our environment, so our behavioral design, and then we're going to go into the integration phase, which is where we actually start to bring this stuff to life, which I'm quite excited about. And we need our training to be practical, right? Not theoretical. We had an explanation of that the other day. Actually, I was talking to my colleague and he was like, I needed to know quickly how to cook a steak. I wanted to see a quick meal. I wanted to be able to do it, right? And then that becomes habit. So we need to apply it to people's real life concepts. And we also need the system to support that, which we'll talk about in a second as well. I get very passionate about that topic, so I'll pass it back to you, Vanessa.
No, I love it. I was wondering how we'd go for time today, because we could really take this.
I know.
Yeah. I am aiming to leave some time for questions too, by the way, for those of you on the call. So please do think of what you'd like us to respond to at the end. So the integration phase. So important, and please don't leave this to after you've rolled out the training, because the horse has bolted. When people go through training, they are automatically watching for those cues of, how serious is the organisation about this? Do we see it role modelled in our leaders? Do we see it reflected in the way the organisation operates? If not, and you're only just thinking about integration after you've done the implementation, it can be too late and hard to get it back on the track. So what good looks like here is that psychosocial safety is sustained and embedded into the organisational system. So thinking about those 5 areas of the system, into leadership and metrics. So it's things like this sustained capability. There's continual cycles of learning. It's integrated. Psychosocial safety is considered and integrated into your performance and risk conversations. It's infiltrated into your onboarding process and your inductions. It's in your reward and recognition structure, in your governance and continual improvement. So it becomes, this commitment to psychosocial safety becomes the way you live and breathe in the organisation. It's how we roll. It's in our systems. It's everywhere. That's how you get it to stick. Maddie, over to you.
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest phases and the most important phases. And I almost think about starting with the end in mind. So talking about this phase earlier is really, really interesting, because you're going to get lots of different perspectives, and there's things that we think might fit, but actually understanding the world of your organization is going to help you get there. I'll go into something in a moment about some of the research, but one of the things I found really, and this probably linked the implement and the integrate phase, is we've done some pieces around accessible sessions, and that wasn't us going in thinking that we knew what to do. It was gaining insight from the neurodivergent staff, and they actually co-designed the session, which actually has what I have learned has had better outcomes for a lot of different people within the organization. And I think knowing that people have this desire throughout your phase to feel seen and heard as a human, most behaviors, there's a need that's driving underneath that. So what we want to actually think about is why a lot of organizational change fails is often because there is a gap between knowing doesn't always equal doing as well. And a lot of the levers that we want to actually look at are not around individual motivation. I find this really interesting because our environment really affects our ability for neuroplasticity, which is to change the way that we think and feel about something. We really actually want to look at some of those social and structural drivers. So things like access to resources, making that the path of least resistance, habits, social support, right? We're social beings. And actually looking at the behavioral skills around training. Often organizations will start with things like town halls, value statements, awareness training, which is a really great place to start. But again, it's making an assumption that if people understand, they will align. And we go back to when we're in the threat response, that overrides logic, right? We've all been there. So I think if we think about the example that micro-learning is there at the moment, it's anchoring a micro-learning skill to a moment, right? So before a performance review, before team meetings, we want to make it behavioral, not conceptual. So a sentence to use, a question to ask, a behavior to practice. We want to try and reduce the cognitive load around implementation as well. So focusing on one skill at a time and being able to improve on that slowly, like any behavior change, right? And we want to embed that into our existing rhythms. So this is one of those things where it's, again, doing less is more, getting those skills and seeing how leaders can reinforce that. Because I think when we start to look at the social element of the integrative phase is spotlighting people that are modeling that behavior, sharing a 60-second video of what worked, right? Like, it's really understanding that it's going to be fluid and it's not necessarily going to be something that you're going to get right overnight, but you will start to see these little actions start to rebuild trust. And I think that's when our system can start to recover as well. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. That actually picks up some of the commentary that I'm seeing in the chat in my peripheral vision about, we have to be careful not to try to take on too much. And when we do sort of do our evaluations and our diagnostics, we might find all of these different issues. It's important not to rush in like a bull at a gate and try to tackle everything at once. In fact, what you've been saying there, Maddie, is it's much more effective to start small with particular skills around, healthy conversations or some respectful behavior or something like that, but do it well and consider how are we going to integrate this? How will we set up the system to support this action after it's done? And that way these little moments can actually really grow and affect the culture, the way people interact on the daily basis.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. So, taking a step back and having a look at all of that, then we can see that the experience of work is shaped by the whole system and not just by isolated actions. So successful transformation and sustainable change happens when it's understood systemically, thinking about that whole system, it's aligned strategically, it's implemented deliberately, and it's integrated into how work gets done. And I love this quote that I've stolen from James Clear in Atomic Habits. We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems, which I think is bang on. So any other comments from you, Maddie, before we start to get to some questions in a moment?
Yeah, no, I really see this space as not only such a chance to improve people's experience and protect people's well-being. I'd see it as a real opportunity. I mean, social change starts in organizations, right? And I think that these skills make us better humans. They create space to solve problems, and we can't solve problems with the same level of thinking that created it. So this idea of bringing in diverse communities and using our emotions and these parts of us as humans that have often sometimes been overlooked historically. So I think it's such a great opportunity to really create that social change. So it's an exciting space as well when we look at some of the positive factors as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Great way to end there, Maddie. So a little call out here. If you'd like to find out more about driving positive safety, and you'd like to get your hands on all sorts of things we have in our portal here, articles, reports, toolkits, quizzes, a whole lot of stuff, videos, case studies, white papers. We've got it all. Access to our back catalogue of webinars. Please do use the QR code on screen, or you can go to our website and find our community page. We have a whole lot of things coming up as well. So we now have a calendar of events on our page, and you can see everything that we have coming up. So really encourage you to jump on that and join us. So that is the formal part of the webinar done, but now I want to get to some questions. We have 9 minutes. I can't believe we actually managed to save some time at the end, Maddie.
I know. I did not think that was going to happen, so I'm very proud of us.
Wonderful. So what are your burning questions?
We do have a couple of questions in the chat for you. The first one comes from Tegan Lowe, and she said that if you've got a workplace that silences open dialogue, feedback, and directives have been given explicitly to gag staff members from speaking to the board and allowing sincere transparency, what would you suggest I could do as a senior leader in my space?
I'm wondering whether there are assessments and diagnostics that are providing that feedback. I mean, that's obviously the felt experience and something you might have noticed goes on. I wonder, I mean, the challenge is always how open to hearing feedback are people when that sort of behavior is going on. So that's my, there's a few red flags going on for me there. But I think it would be very important. Sometimes seeing the data and hearing feedback from the people collectively is the only thing that will get through. So I would probably start there. What are your thoughts, Maddie?
Yeah, it's an interesting space as well. I think often you do need to engage your board and your exec level groups as well and understand some of the ramifications and the cost of inaction in this space. And I think once there is and it's not that, again, I think compliance is a starting point. You don't necessarily want to go in with that level, but we really need to get those two pieces on board, because then everything funnels down from that. So I think sometimes it is a bit of an awareness piece. And we often do sessions that are based on just engaging the board and just engaging exec leadership, because that's the place that you want to engage people to start. And we've often had sometimes a senior leader come to us and say, we want to run a session, we want to handle this. And that happens a lot as well, right? Like we move in and it's about meeting people where they're at as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really good comment there. And we do that a lot when you're finding it difficult to influence those mindsets yourself. That could be when, we've had a lot of clients that's when they bring us in and we run a session with the board and with those senior stakeholders, and it really can help to shift the mindset around these sorts of things. And look, it's not always possible. I've had some feedback from someone in a psychosocial masterclass. She so revved up to do some wonderful things, went back to her organisation, spoke to the general manager of the CEO, and they were so shut down on the idea of psychosocial safety, and said some really downtreading things around, it's not even a thing, blah, blah, blah. And she ended up just realizing that she couldn't have the traction that she wanted to there. And she left and to find a better organization where she could have a positive influence. So, but try to shift those mindsets, the data with assessment.
And I do think as claims start to roll on through and there's a bit more of an awareness of this space, I think naturally you're going to start to see movement as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
Eliza Young has mentioned our functions and departments, organizations operate in different maturity levels and
Mm.
cadences. Do you have a way to recalibrate and bring back the systems into check?
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. There can be sort of mini cultures
Yeah.
happening in different teams, different areas, and they will be at different maturity levels. I certainly
Mm.
know that we've done some, and this actually is where your assessments can really be helpful.
Yeah.
I've seen some of our data from our research team working with different clients where you could actually see that there's different levels of maturity,
Mm.
different issues and different psychosocial hazards and risks going on in different areas of the business. So that visibility is really useful. Um,
Mm.
and it might be that you need a bit of a targeted approach, but it all really stems from leadership, right? I mean, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, Maddie?
Yeah, I completely agree with understanding what some of the root causes are from the first phase, but anchoring it also to the align phase. I think getting these different departments and different areas on board as well, and seeing how they all inform each other, I think is going to be really important. I think also it's probably normal that there might be some areas that mature faster, and it's not going to be, I mean, change isn't linear as well. So I would sort of come back to a process, those first step by step phases, and then it's going from there, and how you're going to start to see that change. Because often when you see, like humans, right, we're hardwired to mimic each other. I think if you see one function of a business starting to perform really well and the culture's doing really good there, people are going to go, what are you doing? Like, what's up here? Like, it's going to have that natural effect. So when you have complex, large organizations like that, you're going to have those micro cultures. I think it's, again, zooming out, but also looking at how they inform each other as well.
Mm, wonderful.
And ladies, we just have one more question left. This is from Angela too. And the question was, do you have any suggestions on KPIs that can be implemented?
Mm. KPIs is an interesting and bit of a hot topic, and I'm sure that we will dive into that one when actually just a little for everyone on still on the call. We will be actually diving into the assessment. What's it called? I'm just having a mental blank. Amy will be going into a lot of that when we in one of our follow-up webinars. What are your thoughts on that one, Maddie?
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting space. It is something that has got a lot of heat at the moment. I think looking at your lead indicators is a really great place to start. But again, it would be around having a proper approach to that, not just targeting your metrics without informing the other pieces of an organization as well. But I do think without that, it is really almost coming into the integrate phase, right? How do we continue to embed, work towards it, improve on it? And it's going to look at your organization that you're in. So it might even be something around how many conversations, supportive conversations that you're having, or looking at making particular goals, wanting manageable goals, right? Being able to reduce something by a certain percent. So I think focusing on those lead indicators in this space is also a really important place to start. Yeah.
Yep. Psychological safety as well. How free do people feel to speak up, to share
Mm-hmm.
concerns, to have challenging conversations, give feedback, etc. And those leadership and culture indicators are very
Yeah.
useful metrics in that space. But in terms of KPIs, it's are leaders having those supportive conversations,
Yeah.
conversations? Are they asking people about their experience of
Yeah.
work and their experience of psychosocial, hazards and
Yeah.
enablers, etc. Mm.
And I think it's interesting because it's then bringing in doing that, but doing that in an authentic, genuine way, which brings in the emotional intelligence, right? Because then that's going to work, right? You're going to have those issues surface quicker, and you're
Hmm.
going to know what to do with that. Like humans, we've got that radar, right? We can feel when someone's not being authentic, and when we've got that information quicker, it could be something like a productivity hindrance, it could be something really, really simple. We've got that. So I think it is really how these factors interrelate together, which is going to ensure the success of it. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you everyone for spending the time with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. It's been great to have you all here, and yeah, please reach out. We always love to talk about this topic, as you could probably tell. And best of luck with everything.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vanessa and Maddie, and to all of our participants. As you exit Zoom, a feedback form is going to pop up. We ask that you take a minute to let us know your thoughts on today's session, and also let us know what topics you'd like to hear more about. Have a fantastic day, stay safe, and we look forward to catching you up at the next webinar.
Thanks, guys.